So let's recap here. We started from the subjective and objective dichotomy, and that's where the modern debate of gender identity sort of confuses itself and goes at an impasse. And then we critiqued both the subjective and the objective part. And after critiquing the subject and objective part, I think we can move on to the part of how can we reconcile the subjective and objective understanding. So rather than maybe rejecting one side for the other, because I think that won't necessarily go anywhere, because one cannot convince another person by just rejecting the ideology. We can somehow take the good stuff from both sides and throw away the chaff and sublate it into something new. And then from this, my question for you would be something like, after the required social training for you to become a person, do you think one would, do you think after all those training, it might be reasonable for one to create new words and pronouns? Because I mean, that's what great artists do, right? You can't understand Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake, but you can't dispute that it's a great work, even though it's really boring. And at the same time, I think Deleuze had an argument about Kafka in his book on Kafka, saying that Kafka is what we can call a minor literature. And what it means by Kafka being someone who writes a minor literature is someone who takes these hidden strands in the linguistic realm and so takes it out and give it new vitality and create new forms of being and meaning through picking up those strands. And could you even say that like the maestro can somehow create, but maybe you need the apprenticeship process with the objective until you can go to the subjective. So the subjective and the objective are not on the same temporal plane against each other, but rather they're on a narrative arc of supporting each other.
I completely agree with that, and I completely agree with the idea that you first start off with the objective and move to the subjective. So I think a lot of times people criticize the right by saying, well, the subjective, you're completely removing the subjective. And I agree that that's correct criticism, because I think it's dangerous to completely remove the subjective. But at the same time, I think that's completely dangerous to get rid of all the objective, as the left has sometimes done. And I think, let's turn back, and I think that this is precisely the area where the Judeo-Christian kind of analogy is so beautiful, is that the law, which came in the Old Testament, was a necessary prerequisite for a fallen human being. So in some sense, the law was only created, this distinction between good and evil was only created because of the fall. Before that, there was only good and evil in value. There wasn't good and evil in moral law. And it was only because people have fallen and have completely lost their way into nothingness, which required there to be a law to say, well, this is the proper direction, the objective, for which you have to carry on and develop yourself. And it's only when someone has a proper understanding of the law, and that was the Pharisees fully fulfilled the law in some sense, but missing the purpose or the reason of the law. And it was only when the law was fully understood by the Pharisees, which Jesus comes along and says, well, I came to fulfill the law. He didn't say I came to destroy the law. He said, I came to fulfill the law, not to destroy it. It's to bring people beyond good and evil, and it almost in a Nietzschean sense, although at the same time, it's not to a will to power, but more so a will to creation. And this is the entire Berdyaevian framework. It's to say, well, we have to go beyond the law. And in the same way, we are going beyond the objective. But the way to go beyond the objective is not to remove the objective, but rather to fulfill it. It is within the mastery of the objective, which allows you to have a development of the objective. For example, how on earth are you meant to understand your own conception of he, him, without understanding first what tradition and history developed of he, him? How on earth are you meant to understand your understanding of your own gender identity without understanding what it first meant to the construction or what history has developed it in the past? And that is precisely what the conflict is. And I think that is how you unify, is to first develop through the objective and into the subjective, in the same way that it goes beyond good and evil as a moral law into a new ethic, which is one of creation, whatever you want to call it. And that is kind of the analogy